Cascade Gardeners. So great to see you again. Today we are speaking with Marianne Binetti on creating a woodland or wild garden. Marianne has a degree in horticulture from WSU and is the author of many books. She is also known for her syndicated newspaper column, still running in the Tacoma News Tribune and the Daily Olympian, and also for her appearances on HGTV. Marianne is a dirt cheap gardener on 2 acres near Enumclaw and leads tours around the world that often include gardens. Welcome, Marianne. It's great to see you again.
Thanks for having me back.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to hearing about creating a woodland or wild garden.
Okay, well, this is a great topic for me because it is how I first started to love gardening. And I bet you most children too. Back in the, 1970s when we played outside in the woods and with my brothers and sisters, we built tree camps and used rocks to outline little trails in our, native woods of Salal and Oregon grape. And that was the start of creating a landscape. Now fast forward to today. We all want to use less water, less pesticides, and oh my gosh, we have got to create better habitats for our native birds and our pollinators and our insects and oh, those adorable little salamanders that are losing all the plants that they need to survive. So this is going to be the tips for creating, I'm going to call it a wild garden room or a woodland garden room. I'm going to assume that you don't have 2 acres like I do, and you're just going to take a part of your garden, maybe a corner of the backyard, and create this little woodland pocket garden. And that's going to be the place where your wildlife can congregate, and the place that you don't have to use extra water, extra fertilizer, and a lot of extra work. So let's start with that whole room concept. So imagine a corner of your yard, and let's say it's about the size of your room, about 8 by 10 bedroom. And the first thing I want you to do is you want to choose an area for the woodland garden, ideally that already has a tree, vine maple, tall cedars, tall Doug firs, and that kind of becomes the focal point of this garden room that we're going to create. Now I'm going to talk in terms of creating the walls, the ceiling, the floor, lovely accent rug, and some furniture. And I will be saying some plant names, but in general, I want you to keep it really simple by thinking that the walls are going to be the big green evergreens, and then the floor and the carpet is going to be the low growing ground cover plants. And then for furniture, things like big boulders, or maybe you have a big sword fern, just the lumpy things in the room. And so, how do we start forming the room? The first thing I want you to do is look at the space, whether it's against a fence, in a corner, and think of leading the eye to a focal point. Let's be really, really simplistic here and say we're going to use a bird bath because you may not have a gorgeous tree or shrub. So you have a bird bath maybe in the corner of the 8 by 10 room. Lead the eye to that using stepping stones or my favorite, cedar shavings as a pathway. So in this area, let's say it's full of weeds and debris and garbage, clear out as much as you can, editing, especially plants that are invasive like Himalayan blackberries or English ivy. But leave the native plants that are attractive like our huckleberries, our sword ferns, our Oregon grape, so that when you make this path, it doesn't have to be straight to the bird bath. You can wind around the sword fern clump and then maybe wind around the big old boulder that's stuck in your garden. So it's leading your eye to this bird bath. I like color. So in this area, think of using like a cobalt blue bird bath, or even if it's a stone bird bath that's white in color. Remember, if it's a cement bird bath, you can paint it. That's a whole nother talk. So we got this bird bath. Now, the walls. Let's say you have no fence, but rhododendrons make excellent walls because they're evergreen and they're kind of dark and heavy. And they could be on the outskirts or, far away from the edges of where this wild room is going to be. And then A really cool thing that I like to talk about is the ceiling. Ideally, you're going to have some big tall trees and or vine maples, and that is something overhead. It's really cool. Let's stay with our bird lovers theme. To have you have a bird bath, to have hanging from the ceiling instead of a chandelier, a little bird house and a lightweight small wren house if you have a small tree, and you can make the length of the birdhouse by using lightweight plastic chain to come down a little bit. One thing I'm not going to say, and I know it's going to irritate people, Shayla, but I'm not going to say put a bird feeder out there. The reason is we are having a tremendous rat problem in a lot of cities, and bird feeders attract rats. The number two reason is the Audubon Society reminds us that seed that we buy at the store that can get moldy, that can attract a lot of birds that shouldn't be feeding in the same spot, can cause disease. Much healthier for the birds to have the native plants that will provide their year-long food. Keeping that in mind, we have the ceiling overhead, we have the walls. Now let's bring in the furniture that is going to also be the dining room for our birds and native pollinators. So we're going to have some salal, which is lovely and evergreen. Some of the evergreen huckleberry that you can find now, most independent nurseries in Western Washington. I also love our native sword ferns. They are a lovely habitat for the little tiny green tree frogs. And when you have sword ferns, I have one little reminder. Don't cut back any brown leaves on your sword ferns in the winter or in early spring. The little tree frogs are hibernating down deep into that sword fern, and you don't want to cut off somebody's leg. Okay, so you got the sword ferns for the tree frogs. After April 15th, that's the day I want you to remember. April 15th is tax day. On that taxing day, you can go out and clean up the brown fronds from your sword ferns. So you got your sword ferns, you got your salal, your huckleberry. It's very woodsy looking, but you don't have to just stick with native plants. There are no rules, and it is your garden. Add some hellebores. They like the shade, and they're drought resistant, and they bloom in the winter, and they're a perennial. That means it comes back year after year. Add some snowdrop bulbs or the little dwarf daffodils, which look very much like woodland plants. We call these the woodland jewels, or the hardy cyclamens. And that's a perennial, like glows from a corn, like a bulb, and they'll bloom, winter. They'll also bloom another variety that blooms in the spring. So that is the furniture. Now, what about a throw rug? Well, we have a great native plant. It's called foam flower, and it is related to the heucheras that you can buy at our local nurseries. Now, heucheras are low growing, and they come in so many colors. You can mix the colors, and they're evergreen, and they don't need extra water. They never need spraying or extra chemical fertilizer. So they're creating that beautiful tapestry of low color. And I'm thinking we're getting a lot of color down there. And for a lot of these spaces, you can use ground covers. Now, I'm going to be talking about ground cover use in another webinar, but for the most part, I want you to realize, study the area. What part of your woodland or wild garden is getting hit with the hot afternoon sun? Now, morning sun is okay for most of our native plants and ground covers. It's that hot afternoon sun that just might come blaring in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and fry everything. So you need to match the plant material to the conditions that you have. So let me say that again. The conditions that you have, the natural conditions, just like in nature, you match the plant material that likes those conditions. You don't say, I want to grow roses. What do roses need? Oh, sun. Chop down trees so you have sun. No, that's not a wild garden. That is a traditional preconceived idea of cleaning everything out and starting with your own ideas. A wild garden or woodland garden is making use of the native trees and some of the native plants. Yes, you're still editing out the bad guys, the ivy, the weeds, the blackberries, but you're leaving the things that we know that our native pollinators love. So I know there's a whole bunch of native plants that we can talk about in our wild garden. Again, another webinar, but sticking with the design theme. So can you picture this now? You're sitting on your patio in the summer, and you look out at the corner at your wild garden, your woodland garden, and you see an area that has no lawn, it's very thick with plants, that has a little path leading towards it, and maybe you're going to put a little low fence in front of it, maybe very rustic, made out of split cedar, or even fallen branches after a storm that you use to make a little low 3 foot tall fence. But you don't fence in, of course, where the stepping stones start. And then that kind of gives the eye this definition of a little corner of a little room, and it makes it very welcoming just by sitting there and looking. Now, I just want to add a little bit of drama to the woodland garden. What I've done in some cases is I've added clematis. So clematis is that vine that flowers in the early spring or the summer, and I love that wild look when the clematis, climbs up a tree and then flops its arms across a rhododendron or a hedge. And it's almost, consider those like the drapery on the walls of your garden room. So clematis is a great vine. If you want to stick more native plants, honeysuckle works. Honeysuckle in the Pacific Northwest has issues with mildew, so the lower leaves don't look quite so good, even though it could be blooming at top. So a trick on that, I do this with the naked knees of my clematis as well, is, you have a lower shrub in front of the vine. And that lower shrub not only shades the root zone of the vine, but it also hides the naked knees, so to speak, so that you don't see the ugly part of the vine, you just see the lovely part of the vine. So there we go. We've created a lovely woodland garden room. We're attracting the birds with the bird bath and the bird house, and we've got all the the plants that are pollen rich and nutrient dense that our pollinators and our birds need. Because you're using these thick native plants and it's very thickly planted, no naked earth. Nature abhors a vacuum, and if you leave empty soil, you will get weeds, which are simply unwanted plants. So if you're filling in with heucheras and hellebores and these low-growing plants, you can have a dense understory. And who likes that? Well, the little chickadees need that. The little frogs that we talked about, the newts, the salamanders. You're giving them back their little corner of the earth that they had first before we ruined it all. So I encourage you all, think about, especially in the wintertime, this is our time, guys, think about creating a little jewel of a woodland garden in your own backyard. What do you think, Shayla?
That sounds amazing. I'm thinking the only thing I would add is a chair for on those hot
Oh, I
summer
like it.
days when the sun is on the deck and it's almost too hot. Move
Mhm.
my little body down to my woodland garden with my book and just my chair and sit and observe and enjoy. It sounds
Oh,
absolutely
I love
lovely.
that. Okay, I'm changing my whole idea. The furniture is a chair or a bench.
Whatever. Yeah,
Yay. I love that.
sounds fun. Well, thank you so much for your information. It was really insightful, and I very much look forward to designing my woodland garden for my chair, right? For me.
Okay.
So thanks again. It was
Okay,
fun.
bye.